Welcome to Story Scoop. My name's Balla and I'm here on Jarrah country in southeastern Australia. My inspiration comes from everything around me. I like to take a sketchbook with me. I really love close-up details and I love colour. As you can see, this day was featuring pink. When I go out, I take a sketchbook and I use a fountain pen with waterproof ink, and I have an aqua brush, which is this one, and that's filled with water that I can keep filling up. And I use either watercolour paints or watercolour pencils. This picture was done up in Arnhem Land. The Yolngu women were quite shy to have photos taken, but they loved me sketching them, and it was a great way to learn about their culture. I went up there to learn about weaving, but I learnt so much more. When they took me out, they really wanted to show me things, and we moved really quickly through the bush, so my work is really fast sketches. I don't mind that at all. A lot of people would be critical of their work and say, oh, but the hands are wonky, it's all out of proportion. For me, it's just a way of recording and learning about the world and culture, and it's a great way to meet people as well. I even get to taste some very unusual bush tucker, like these lichen worms. At the time of drawing this, I was standing knee deep in mud in the mangroves. I love to do the landscapes. It really connects me to the place. And this one I like because while I was drawing this one, we then walked in this direction and I can see where I've moved through country through each of the pictures. I really like to acknowledge the place I'm in, and this is in Yuan country. This is from my sketchbook in India. I was doing lots of quick little sketches of people moving, and also some slower ones where I could really stop and chat with people and learn more detail. So my books come from my real experiences and then I change them. So River Time was actually a story about myself and my partner at the time going paddling, but I changed it to a boy and his uncle because I think kids would much prefer a story about that than a middle-aged woman. This is the sequel to that, rock hopping. And this is my latest book, the graphic novel that came out, Landing with Wings. This is researching for that book down on the local creek with my friends and my ecologist friend Carl. Here I was looking up water bugs that ended up here via my sketchbooks, of course. I love those whirligig beetles. I really liked doing this drawing where it was half underwater as well. So I start, when I've got all the sketches and research, I start doing a very large detailed storyboard. It takes me about a year. And then it ends up looking like this in the book. It's really the story of the friendship of these two and her getting to know the place she lives. Again, I'm using real things like our local library and our librarian Jess. And the facts in the story, they really are the facts, the ecology facts, even though the kids in the story are made up. And I was very grateful to have the support and interest of our local elder and educator, Uncle Rick Nelson, and be able to include a traditional smoking ceremony and welcome to country. I'm currently working very slowly on my next book, and one of the main characters is this little emu. So I hope you like my books, and that's all for now. Bye.
Hello and welcome to Story Scoop. I'm Dee White and I love writing, and I've written more than 20 books for children and young adults. Thank you to the Children's Book Council of Australia and the Society of Children's Book Writers and Illustrators for bringing us this Story Scoop segment. Today I'll be talking about turning fact into fiction, and I'll be sharing tips from how I wrote two of my books that came out last year. The first one was Beyond Belief, and that was inspired by the true story of Muslims at a Paris mosque who saved Jewish children during World War II. The second one is Eddie Popcorn's Guide to Parent Training, and this is a very different book. It's humorous fiction, and it was inspired by some of my own personal experiences growing up, and also experiences of my two sons when they were 12. I grew up with stories of the Holocaust and always knew that it was something I wanted to write about one day. My grandfather was in Dachau concentration camp for a time. He was one of the lucky ones to be released. And then he and my father and my father's mother fled Austria after Kristallnacht and came to Australia. So I grew up with stories from my father of their terrifying escape from their homeland, and I drew on this fear and experience in Ruben's story in Beyond Belief. I was actually researching for another book, Paris Hunting, when I came across the true account of Muslims at a Paris mosque who saved Jewish children during World War II. And I thought, this is a story I want to write about. In July 1942, the Nazis ordered the arrest of 24,000 Jews, gypsies and people with physical and mental illnesses, and those people were to be taken to the concentration camps. Women and children had never before been arrested by the Nazi soldiers, and this is why the Algerian Muslims at the Paris mosque decided to help the Jewish people escape from Paris. So even though I made up Ruben's story, I included that factual historical information as part of the plot. I spent a month in Paris researching this story, and even though Ruben was a character I made up, I wanted to walk in his shoes and to feel what it would be like to be in the streets of Paris during the war. I did a tour of the Paris sewers so that I could experience the sounds and the smells and know what it was like for Ruben escaping through the sewers from the mosque with the German soldiers coming after him. The character of Ruben was actually inspired by my older brother Guy when he was 11, and he was that same caring, sensitive and a little bit innocent kind of a boy. Real people provide great inspiration for characters, and my character of Eddie Popcorn in Eddie Popcorn's Guide to Parent Training was actually inspired by both my sons, and also there's quite a lot of me in there. I love to write, and I was a little bit mischievous too when I was 11. And I drew on my experiences of growing up as a child. My parents didn't believe in sleep-ins on school holidays, and they were always telling me to tidy up my bedroom, and I could never understand it when the garage that they kept all their things in was always such a mess. So they're the kind of experiences that Eddie has in this story. Eddie has a new adventure. It's Eddie Popcorn's Guide to Teacher Taming, and in that, things like using apple labels to decorate your school blazer is something that I drew from the experience of what one of my sons used to do when he was at school. So as you can see, it can be a lot of fun and make your stories really interesting to include people you know and places you've been and things that you have personally experienced. If you'd like to know more about me or my work, you can visit me or contact me through my website at www.dscribe.com.au.
Hi everyone, my name is Kaye Baillie and I'm a children's author. Welcome to another episode of Story Scoop. Today I'll be talking about fact or fiction. You probably know that when a story is fiction, it means it's been made up or parts of it have been made up. So even if you write about something factual like World War I, which is what I did when I wrote Message in a Sock, the story is fiction because I made up the characters and what happened to them. Now let's look at a book that I wrote using all facts, which means the story is non-fiction. The Friendly Games is about a boy, John Ian Wing, the 1956 Melbourne Olympic Games, and a letter John wrote suggesting how to change the closing ceremony of the Olympic Games. So why did I write The Friendly Games? Well, have you ever discovered something really interesting and you wanted to find out more about it? That's what happened when I discovered John's letter. I wanted to know how and why he wrote this letter, but I needed to do a lot more research to create a story. Now I'll tell you 3 things I did in my research apart from searching on the internet. I stood outside John's home in Bourke Street, Melbourne, and this photo I took of his bedroom window provided details for the illustrator Fiona to use in our book. And here's how it looks in the book. I listened to this CD of John being interviewed. He spoke about his childhood in an orphanage or children's home and that one of his birthday cakes was shaped like a ship. And here's the illustration. I searched through old newspapers at the State Library in Melbourne. This article provided many of the details I needed to write about the closing ceremony. And here's the illustrated spread. Now that you've heard about my research, here's Fiona Burrows, the illustrator, to talk about how she created the wonderful images for the book.
Hi, my name's Fiona Burrows and I'm the illustrator of The Friendly Games. So when I was sent the manuscript for this book, I was really excited to illustrate it because I love John Wing's story and I love the fact that it's a true story as well. As an illustrator, it's really exciting when you get to illustrate something that has actually happened. It means that you have to go and do quite a lot of research. So one of the things that I had to do when I started illustrating this book was go and look at a whole lot of old photos of Melbourne in the 1950s. I was looking at things like what did the buildings look like, what did all the people, what were they wearing, what did they look like, things like the cars and the televisions and the houses, so all the little extra details. The other thing that I had to look up was the Melbourne 1956 Olympics, because there were a lot of photos and different things that were recorded around that time. So I went and looked up, what did it look like, how were the streets decorated, what were some of the main things that that were documented from that time. The style of the book was something that I had to think about, and I chose to do it in a combination of this black and white sort of pen and ink style because I thought that would match well with the historical feel of the book. It's good for doing lots of detail, so there was lots of buildings, lots of little detail in the book. And then I combined that with really bright kind of pops of colour because around that time, so the 1950s, sort of the mid-century, that was one of the sort of iconic looks of that period. I really loved illustrating this book. It's really fun as an illustrator when you get to bring to life a real event and you get to do that research and you get to find out what did it look like at the time, what did people experience, what were all of those little details that you need to kind of include in the story. And so all of those things kind of come together to make the finished book. So that's my part of The Friendly Games.
Thanks, Fiona. That is so fascinating. So to finish off, you will find my author's notes at the very back of the book with more details about how I wrote the book and some of my sources for the research. Perhaps you can research an interesting subject and write a factual story too. Or you could write a letter about something you care about, just like John did. You can go to the publisher's website, that's Midnight Sun, and check out the teacher's notes. There you will find activities plus a link to John's handwritten letter. And guess what? You'll also find a second letter that John wrote that not many people know about. If the Tokyo Olympics go ahead this year, hopefully they will, make sure you read this book first and then watch the closing ceremony. So a big thank you to the Children's Book Council of Australia, New South Wales branch for creating Story Scoop, and thanks everybody for watching. Bye for now.